Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. This is your host, Ryan Kennedy, and today I have a very special interview talking about what I would consider to be one of the most underrated vitamins in human nutrition, and that is vitamin E. One of my foundational mentors is a naturopath named David Getoff, and he was one of the first people I had ever heard even discuss vitamin E. You know, everyone talks about vitamin C and vitamin D3 and B complex, and no one's talking about vitamin E. And he really taught me a lot about it, you know, and outlined the differences between tocopherols and tocotrienols and how to optimize your intake through high quality supplementation and the important role vitamin E plays as a way to prevent fats from oxidizing as they circulate through our system, because it's a powerful fat soluble antioxidant. And then he also taught me about the importance it plays just in your cardiovascular system and longevity and all sorts of anti-cancer benefits. And so I've been deep into vitamin E. I've been recommending it to a lot of patients I work with for years now. And in today's episode, I'm interviewing Dr. Barrie Tan, who is a scientist, and he is regarded as the world's foremost expert on vitamin E. So I've invited him on the show today to talk about the role vitamin E plays in human longevity and two nutrients that are derived from the annatto plant, tocotrienol and GG, which we're going to get into. Most people have never heard of this second one. It has a long name. I'm abbreviating it GG. But both of these really help with healthy aging, and they contain a lot of anti-inflammatory benefits, among other benefits. So Dr. Barrie, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I know your followers follow you for a long time, so I hope that I'll do justice and answer the questions and give the information to the audience of your broadcast listening to. Thank you.
Oh, I know you will, dude. So I'd like to start by giving people listening in, outlining the differences between tocopherols and tocotrienols, which are two separate components to the vitamin E complex. Because most people, when they hear vitamin E, they'll see it on like a multivitamin label. And usually the multivitamins will only have alpha tocopherol. That's the only thing, from my understanding, the FDA counts as vitamin E on a label, even though tocopherols have alpha, delta, gamma. They have all subtypes. And then you also have the whole other side of the complex you almost never hear about, the tocotrienols. And so I want to give people an overview, just an understanding of what this all looks like.
Yeah. And then this is probably a perfect time because exactly 100 years ago, 1922, vitamin E was discovered. It was discovered in UC Berkeley by two pediatricians. And most of our audience may or may not know, alpha tocopherol became a vitamin simply because it is required for the fetal growth. It's bringing a fetus to full term. Most people today know vitamin E as an antioxidant, and that is all good, but it was known as a vitamin because of that. At the time, tocopherol was not connected to tocotrienol. I'm just giving you a very brief snapshot how the development of tocopherol and tocotrienol and then split them like that for your question. Perfect. That was in 1922, and then about 40 years later, they found something. By the time 30 years after, they were able to find out alpha, beta, delta, gamma tocopherol. Then they found out something that almost a little shadowy compound when they did on chromatography. At the time, they thought that it's so similar to tocopherol, they actually erroneously mislabeled them. So if you look at old literature, you will see besides the 4 Greek letter alpha, beta, delta, gamma, tocopherol, you will also see nu, epsilon, zeta, and phi, like that. Those tocopherol that they call, they are actually happen to be alpha, beta, delta, gamma, tocotrienol, like that. So therefore, the audience, if you capture this, it's almost as if that if somebody did not persist to study this vitamin E, it will be lost in translation. It will be a second runt of a birth that's never going to happen. That came out in 1960. So 1920, 1960 for discovery, then another 20 years would have lapsed. In 1980, two universities blessed them. University of Liverpool in England and our own University of Wisconsin in Madison. And that these two professors were studying, one from rubber and the other one from barley. Very odd places. They extract them and they know right away from better techniques that they were tocotrienol. And then they persisted on the study. They found out first that tocotrienol downregulate and decrease the ability of the body to synthesize cholesterol on hypercholesterolemia thing. And then clearly they show alpha tocopherol cannot do that, tocotrienol can. That was the very first time tocotrienol was shown to be distinguished from its ability to function different from tocopherol. As an antioxidant, they both do the same. The tocotrienol did better. And then I came into the scene as a young assistant professor at University of Massachusetts. Then I decided that the audience need to understand, to distinguish it. So now today, you fast forward to today, there are 4 tocopherols and 4 tocotrienol, simply from the Greek letter alpha, beta, delta, gamma. And of the 4 tocopherols, alpha tocopherol is the best known. There's synthetic, there's natural. So even natural is questionable how good it is. Synthetic is even worse. And when they're so inexpensive to begin with. The tocotrienol is harder to find in nature. You find them. If you ask, oh, if I were to be American eating American food, where do I find tocotrienol and how much would I consume in my meal? I know you didn't ask that, but I answered that question. Typically from a normal diet, we'll get probably 2 to 3 milligram tocotrienol, not a lot. Where do you get it from? A monocot, like avocado, coconut, palm oil, but we don't consume a lot of palm oil in this country. And surprisingly, from annatto, which I discovered 25 years ago when I was in South America. What is the difference chemically? The structure of a vitamin E look like a sperm. It's got a head, antioxidant, and a long saturated tail. That's tocopherol. And for tocotrienol, the same antioxidant head, but it's got unsaturated tail. You know, this is really a gift of nature. There are many antioxidants that we have, but very few antioxidant is the one that I consider important, that there's too much noise out there. Like good antioxidant would be astaxanthin, resveratrol, EGCG. There are many out there, but they don't settle in the biomembranes of our cell to protect the lipid. If you look at the biomembrane, it's got phosphate group and then fatty acid. So the thing that snuck in there perfectly would be looking like a sperm. Just think of it. The head will be antioxidant and then the tail will be saturated. Vitamin E is that kind of molecule. If you look at resveratrol, it's got 3-4 ring and then it's got 4 OH group. So it's got heads everywhere. Nothing sticks in there. It doesn't fit. But tocopherol, tocotrienol fit. And we have done many studies for a cell protection, and tocotrienol protects, tocopherol protect. It is for the lipid antioxidant, but tocotrienol does a better job. The difference, just a saturated tail for tocopherol, unsaturated tail for tocotrienol.
Interesting. So what you're saying is that the antioxidants like resveratrol and maybe carotenoids and others are not acting within the cell. They can't get in the cell to exert their antioxidant protection against oxidative stress or damage. But these unique nutrients in vitamin E can. And from my understanding, CoQ10 also has this unique benefit of where it can actually work in the cell. And then when these other ones, let's say you take resveratrol, it's not working in the cell. Well, how is it exerting the benefits? Is it just doing so through the bloodstream?
Yeah, you mean for the non-lipid soluble one?
Exactly.
Like resveratrol and quercetin, for example. Curcumin is another one. They have so much OH group, they will be on the surface of the cell wall. So to the extent that the cell wall is signaling something to reduce inflammation, like curcumin, or to the extent that it is providing antioxidant protection on the cell wall, not inside the cell, on the wall itself, then they would speak with vitamin C as an antioxidant, work that way. But for me, I want to make the language very simple. We have protein in our body to protect. We have fat in our body to protect, and we have a nucleic acid in our body to protect. The nucleic acid is inside the cell, in the holy of holy. By the time you get oxidized, it's really bad. You know, you have to cross a cell wall, and then the protein structure, you need protection, and then there'll be more water-soluble one. But almost most of the time, when you think of a roadkill in a hot summer day, just think, I know this is a terrible example, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That horrible stench is serious oxidized fat, or you have a stick of butter on a hot summer day. So for me, the lowest bar of activation of protection is to protect fat. And most of the fat is laden on the cell wall. So if you can protect that, you are providing a propagating ability of the cell for what goes into the cell and what comes out of the cell. That is just so basic and so important. If you can accept that as a definition, then you'll cut the noise out for you when everybody claims their thingy is always an antioxidant. So the antioxidant you want to ask, is it a lipid antioxidant? If you ask that question, you'll get the answer that you will need to protect your health. And you mentioned earlier on CoQ10. Yes, amen to that. CoQ10 is a very strong lipid antioxidant, but there's a difference. In the back here, I don't know if your audience can see that. This is the molecule of CoQ10. Super long tail. You see that?
Yeah.
That is the antioxidant head there. Long tail. And this is the tocotrienol. So it's able to get into it much shorter because it's cleaner and it's long tail. Because of that, two things spin out of CoQ10. CoQ10 is made by the human body in situ, right at the cell, so it doesn't go anywhere. However, people supplement CoQ10, and supplemental CoQ10, hundreds of companies and more is going to come, always claim that the CoQ10 is bioavailable. The flip side of it is simply to say, exogenously fed CoQ10 is very hard to get into the body. That's why people keep saying that. But if they can get 1 to 3% absorbed, that's already a charm. But for tocotrienol, fortunately, the tail is much shorter. If you just take it with a meal, it would just go to the cell. We have many studies, Ryan, to show that it protects oxidative damage. All the way, the protection is so good, the C-reactive protein drop. I know you're going to ask some question on the clinical trials. All of this we show for tocotrienol. By the way, on all of this that we show in tocotrienol, we did not find amazing results from tocopherol. They did do some, but usually a distant second, if not a distant third.
I love this. And your explanation of how it's helping on a lipid level is really foundational. And one of the ways that I always recommend tocotrienol be used is if you are going to be eating unstable fats. So I recommend people steer clear of most polyunsaturated fats, these vegetable oils that are really dominant in the American diet. They're used in a lot of restaurant foods. They're used in all fried foods. They're extremely pernicious to our health. I think they are the #1 offender of chronic illness from a dietary standpoint. Worse than sugar, worse than carbs is these rancid oxidized vegetable oils, canola, soybean, safflower, these highly unstable fats. And whenever someone is going to be eating, let's say some French fries, because Dr. Barrie, we're all human. All of us like to enjoy some food once in a while that may not be the best for our health. I always make it a point personally to take tocotrienols with that meal to help mitigate some of the oxidative damage, because that is what causes so much inflammation in our bodies at the cellular level, because these unstable fats start to comprise our cell membranes and start to cause cell misfiring and essentially an inflammatory response within the cell membrane. And these type of vitamin E, these tocotrienols, from my understanding, can really help to serve as an antioxidant protection when that is the case. Would you say that's an accurate?
Yeah, I 100%. If you try to imagine, this would be the fatty acid. You mentioned unsaturated fatty acid, the phosphate group sticking out in the water, and this is a long tail here. So a polyunsaturated fat, say, they typically would contain 3 double bond. It'd be one here, and one here. Oftentimes, those double bond are the one that be oxidized. So if you have tocotrienol, you stick right here. Not going to be as long. So if it's any oxygen that will attack the double bond, it will come and scavenge, meaning to take the oxygen away and making this fatty acid whole. So if you take a lot of polyunsaturated fat, you're going to have this for protection. If you take things that are monounsaturated, say with just only one, like olive oil, oleic acid, one, bond, then the protection is better. Because saturated fat, then there'll be no double bond is better. Now, there's always two sides to the coin. We would like to encourage people to take I know the word polyunsaturated is not used for that, but one can also say omega-3 is polyunsaturated. It's got 4 or even 5 double bond, but much longer like that. And they have many good health reasons for doing that. So if one take fish oil, now good and good, right? You take fish oil, you have to take tocotrienol with it. Otherwise, the oxidative damage to the cell would increase because they even have more double bond, except that kind of polyunsaturated fat is a good kind, as opposed to the commercial polyunsaturated fat that you mentioned, omega-6 with 2 or 3 double bond, especially alpha-linoleic acid like that. Those are not good. You know, with the advent of the last 100 years, there are a lot of this proliferation of unsaturated fat out there. Wholesomely agree with you.
Yeah, the high intake of linoleic acid is no bueno, folks. And this tocotrienol is an incredible way, like Dr. Barrie is suggesting, to prevent any type of oxidation or peroxidation to occur to your precious omega-3s you get from your salmon or from your supplements. And there are people in the health space that advise against omega-3s because of their instability that Dr. Barrie's outlining. And I'm with you, Dr. Barrie. I'm like, get your omega-3s, but have the antioxidants on board, like the tocotrienols, to prevent them from becoming damaged inside the body so you get the best of both worlds. So I'm really glad you touched on that, because a lot of people think omega-3s are inherently a godsend for everyone all the time in whatever amounts. And if you're not having the proper antioxidants, they actually can become a problem for some folks. And so that's a really good thing that you outlined there. So coming back to some of the food sources. So for people that are like, all right, how do I get this in my diet? We're going to touch on the supplements, which is obviously more therapeutic dosages that we can get. But you said we get vitamin E tocotrienols 2 to 3 grams a day from healthy fats like coconut, avocado. I think you said palm fruit oil, which is another kind of similar saturated fat as coconut oil. It's eaten in the tropics, and it's becoming more popular now than it used to be. Isn't there vitamin E? I want you to clarify this. And I think this is tocopherols in foods like almonds or even animal fats like butter or ghee. Doesn't that have vitamin E complex within it?
Yes, they do. Just to correct that, it's not 2 to 3 grams, it's 2 to 3 milligram that we can get from food like that. And even for tocopherol, this is for the contact. Even if you eat a normal healthy diet, you typically would get about 10 to 12 milligram of alpha tocopherol, because you need to eat a lot of fat to get that. This is where they are. See, that intuitively should be teaching us something. Why does the plant make? One thing to be clear, I like to do this and enunciate this. The plant that we eat and bless our health never make anything for human being. We got it in the head. They make it to protect themselves, you know, like that. So, and most of this vitamin E is in the oil. Why is it in the oil? They make the vitamin E in the oil to protect the fat. Isn't that a wonderful? That's very intuitive. They make it, and including soybean oil that we don't want to touch. You have a lot of tocopherol, and no tocotrienol. Corn has, but corn also had the polyunsaturated. We don't like. But anyway, we eat meat, and the meat eat cornmeal, so you can get small amount of this tocotrienol in the meat. Correct. If you were to eat fruit, monocot. That means coconut. They're not dicotyl. They don't break up. They don't look like peanut. They conveniently break into 2 pieces. It's just like you have to hack it like a coconut to break it, because they're monocot. They're one piece together. Avocado is one. They tend to have it. I don't know why the plant makes it that way. So if you eat avocado, pistachio is a dicot, macadamia nut. So you have that. So, but still, even if you eat all of this, probably you can get to 5. If somebody is holistic and wanted to get from a plant source, of course, you can get palm oil, saturated fat there. If you want, you can go to a store, Hispanic store, to buy annatto, and you can use it for your cooking. If you use annatto for cooking, just be aware that the food will turn more reddish color because of the red color thing. I can show you this.
Yeah, annatto is actually used in a lot of food coloring
Yes.
products. If you wanted to have like an orange or red like coloring agent for baking, a lot of them use annatto to get that pigment.
And this is an example of a fruit that you see there. That is a
Yep.
pigment, and the pigment is carotene. Nothing unusual. So if you use that for cooking, you will include another 2 to 3 milligram there. So that would be the food source. Otherwise, in a typical American diet, unless we consume a lot of palm oil or annatto, we usually don't see that. If you ever go to South America, you see that they speckle a lot of this annatto in the different dishes. So
Got it. And what would you say is the optimal dosage based on your clinical data for the human to get in tocotrienols? You mentioned 2 to 3 milligrams is typical for someone's standard diet. They might get a little bit more if they focus on those higher food concentrations, but what's kind of the perfect scenario? How much would you take of tocotrienol per day?
okay, I like to segment this into, based on a clinical study, three different situations. I'll begin with the lower one going up, and you can see the severity would increase. For antioxidant protection, like we spent some time talking to, the antioxidant protection for the cell wall is probably somewhere 100 to 200 milligram, depending on the size of a person. 100 to 200 milligrams is no magic number. Thereabout, each day will be a good antioxidant protection. Just take it with a meal. I just had my lunch. I took it with a meal. And the second one would be moderate chronic condition. I'm in my 60s, so a moderate chronic condition would be I have genetic hypercholesterolemia. So full disclosure. So because of that, I take about 300 milligram. So for moderate chronic condition would be anywhere from 2 to 400 milligram, depending on the size, family history, brother, sister, mother, father of different things. People can make that judgment. Then for severe conditions, and when I talk about clinical study afterward, I can mention examples of severe condition, then it'll be more like 400 to 500, 400 to 500 milligram, like that, of overt conditions that people already have. So if a person have no condition or anything like that, healthy, energetic, then it will be just antioxidant protection. 1 to 200 milligram will be fine because they're strong, exercising. They just want it to be. So if you're strongly exercising, you're consuming a lot of oxygen for exchanges. So that would be just antioxidant protection to prevent the radical oxygen to capture free radical that you want to get rid of. Then 1 to 200 milligram would be just fine.
Have you seen, with your genetic predisposition to high cholesterol, have you seen your cholesterol come down since you've started taking higher amounts of tocotrienols?
Good question. I have, and when I took it, just for the context, in a clinical study, we found that the tocotrienol, typically anywhere from 2 to 300 milligram, the cholesterol drop 15 to 20%, as opposed to a statin drug, typically 40 to 50%. That's a drug, and this is 15 to 20%. In my case, it's more like 5 to 10%. And then I did some genetic testing because I have genetic hypercholesterolemia, so it did not drop as it would be had I eat a lot of hamburgers and fat. See, I get cholesterol increase there. That's not genetic, dietary, but mine is not dietary, genetic. So the drop is not as dramatic. But I still, then I say, oh, then in that case, why did you continue to take? People ask me that question. I continue to take for the other reason. I continue to take because tocotrienol is an antioxidant. Even though my LDL is high, I do not want my LDL to be oxidized. They say that LDL is potentially atherogenic, but oxidized LDL is atherogenic, so it prevents it from oxidation for that reason. Then I have another marker. I asked the doctor, please look at my C-reactive protein because I want to know if my inflammation is in control. So happy to say over the years I've taken tocotrienol, my CRP is 1 or less than 1. So my inflammation is in check. So I'm pleased to hear that because half the people that have a heart problem, are caused by cholesterol. The other half is by inflammation. So that's the two imbalance. So it is good for me to know the inflammation. Tocotrienol address hyperinflammation.
I'm glad you made that distinction, because a lot of people think inherently high LDL is not good, and that's going to increase your chances for heart disease or cardiovascular complications. But like you said, I've found the same thing to be true. It's not just high LDL, it's high oxidized LDL that can start to become problematic. And keeping your LDL from oxidizing, you need these antioxidants like tocotrienol. So it's something I utilize clinically all the time with people I work with, because it's just such a powerful intervention for anyone that does have high cholesterol. Have you seen it have any impact on triglycerides?
Oh, you're touching a sweet spot for me. and this is true. Not everything in life is very intentional, and the cholesterol one was intentional because of the published work from other professors in other university. So when we were doing studying with people with hypercholesterolemia, they are not otherwise with high triglyceride. But I noticed that the cholesterol we can predict, but then the triglyceride drop. But they are not people with fatty liver disease, metabolic syndrome. And then I said, hey, the triglyceride drop. So I asked the professor, would you be kind enough to conduct a study for me for people with metabolic syndrome and look at the triglyceride? So for the audience, for your audience, this is a teaching moment, and this is not like I'm so fantastic and know so much. You know, I learn as I go along. I have been a member of the American Diabetes Association for almost 30 years. It's a long time. So this is once you get this concept, you just got it, and then you just nail it down. And I happened to meet the Professor Gerald Reaven before he retired, and now he passed away. He was the one that came up with the original concept of sugar, fat, and another thing in our body, and he could not figure it out. He called it syndrome X. When he figured it out, then he changed the word, dropped the word X, and become metabolic syndrome. And metabolic syndrome is simply this: hypertriglyceridemia always precedes hyperglycemia. So that means high triglyceride always precedes high sugar. So before somebody is diabetic, they are pre-diabetic. In the pre-diabetic state, the sugar is still a little bit normal high, but not high enough to be diabetic. Their triglyceride is high. Of course, if they're diabetic, the sugar is high, the triglyceride is also high. That means it's something to be said that something is wrong with our metabolism, and the triglyceride goes up first, and it's kind of like controlling the sugar until the flood dam bursts open, and it can't control the triglyceride, and then the sugar just shoots up. So therefore, it is very good telltale sign for all of our listeners, including me. We don't wait until our sugar to go up first. We check our triglyceride. Happy news. When we did the study on people with metabolic syndrome, we saw that the triglyceride dropped. So right now, I fast forward all the clinical trials on this that we have studied. This is a fantastic take home. We study people with pre-diabetes, triglyceride high, the triglyceride drop. We study people with diabetes, the triglyceride is also high, the sugar is also high, the triglyceride drop. So encouraged by this, therefore it works for people with metabolic syndrome. So encouraged, we decided to be all out. After this, I think that I spent every last penny to do all the clinical study. We now have completed 3 clinical trials on people with fatty liver disease. Clearly, 20 to 25% American are fatty liver, and fatty liver disease is another manifestation of metabolic syndrome, except when the liver is fatty, there is no cure for fatty liver. And 30 years ago, cirrhotic liver is because of excessive alcohol drinking. Nobody then would have believed that if you gavage a huge, endless amount of fat, you can actually inundate the liver ability to process the fat, and the liver become fatty, and fatty liver disease. And the name of NAFLD is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I have never seen a disease so awkwardly and so long, so that they have to explicitly tell you this is non-alcohol fatty liver disease like that. So we did this, Ryan. We did it, a 3-month study, a 6-month study, published, and then now we just completed a 12-month study. What is the shorthand news of this? Systematically, we saw that the inflammation is reduced, liver enzymes is decreased, steatosis, which is the fat in the liver, is also reduced, and finally, the last one is a bad one. If you have fibrosis, when it's too much fat in the liver, you have scarring tissue. Once the scarring tissue sets in, it's very hard to remove the scarring tissue. So this is good. We're hoping that after the study is published, keeping my fingers crossed, we're going to take all this study to the FDA. We trust the FDA would allow, I'm just shooting for the moon now, FDA to allow us to have a structure function claim. I'm doing all the studies that I can to prove this. This is far away from snake oil. And if they allow, then I may just have one line on the bottle that say, this will support liver health. Something like this, but the audience can Google and find the studies on the internet. So give me another 6 months. When the study is published, I would love the audience to go and read the study themselves. But for me, this is a blessing. It's a long time in the making.
I love that. I love that, man. And let me tell you a couple other things for the fatty liver, because I have a lot of experience helping people reverse fatty liver. One is the tocotrienols. Love using vitamin E complex for fatty liver. But the other two things that I've seen work wonders, Dr. Barrie, and this is something you can take note of if you haven't implemented this before. One is lecithin. A good non-GMO lecithin is fantastic because of the phospholipids, the phosphatidylcholine and phosphatidylserine, as well as the fat emulsifying properties of lecithin can be very therapeutic for breaking up fatty deposits in the liver. And then the other thing that really helps once you're in later stage, when you start to develop the fibrosis, is systemic enzymes. Bringing in a good proteolytic enzyme complex, I really like one called Vitalzyme that incorporates things like serrapeptase and other systemic enzymes, can help to break down that fibrosis and actually reverse that later stage, which, like you said, is very difficult. And many Western medicine physicians will say, like, at that point, it's too far gone, but it can absolutely be improved upon utilizing those types of interventions. So I'm a big fan of those two in conjunction with the tocotrienols.
Wow, thank you for that. I'm making note for it, because if I get a chance to continue the next study, I may tap on your brain and you can help me so I can do a study with inclusion of the other to see if 1 + 1 or 1 + 2 would even able to increase further. I did not know this, so thank you very much.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And so coming back to the tocotrienols, tocopherols, something I've learned, I want to run by you that I think is important for listeners to be aware of. I've heard that you can't take you shouldn't take tocotrienols with tocopherols because they will compete for absorption and it can diminish the uptake of the tocotrienols if you have, let's say, a vitamin E product, a complex that has both in there. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. Thank you. This is a more difficult concept to communicate, and I have spoken to many homeopathic doctors and other people before. Because the vitamin E is a spectrum, 4-tocopherol and 4-tocotrienol. And in life, we usually think that if you make one compound, then it's allopathic. It suggests that kind of concept. But if you have it all mixed, then it is a spectrum, then nature should do better. I don't, in principle, disagree like that. But if one accepts that there is a possibility of synergism, when you have what nature can make, like polyphenol and carotenoids is another class, and vitamin K is another class. If you accept the premise of synergism, all thinking person should also accept the premise of antagonism. Usually, we don't think about that. And right now, this is not setting any precedent. When we were doing this, I painfully spent 10 years before I discovered this. we were doing work that have a mixture of tocopherol and tocotrienol, and in animal study that work. So when we get to do human study, roughly speaking, 45% of our trials work, 45% of our trials didn't work, and 55% of our trial work. A little bit more tip in the balance, if we half work, half not work, that's not the kind of odds that we want. And I said, how come it worked like that? So we stopped all our clinical trial. We went back to animal study with the suspicion that the alpha tocopherol. And you know what we did? We used this amount of tocotrienol to do the animal study. We have to stop the clinical trial, and then it worked to lower cholesterol. Then in another group, we use the same amount of tocotrienol with 25% alpha tocopherol, and then the reducing of the cholesterol is less by 30%, and then we use 50%. Then less, a little bit more, we use 75%, it almost come to not reducing. Then we realize there is an antagonism. So later we found in the study, unlike all the other vitamin E, alpha tocopherol has a transport protein. What does a transport protein mean? In the evolution of time, alpha tocopherol has a chaperone. So if you take alpha tocopherol, it goes right in. All the other ingredient we have, if it doesn't have a transport protein, it just goes through by passive diffusion, like I suggested to people to take fat so they absorb like that, like you mentioned lecithin like that. But a few compounds that are critical to the human body in the evolution of time we have. What we're not example, vitamin A, retinol. If you take beta carotene that convert to vitamin A, it will be naive to automatically say the vitamin A would go to the eye and will be part of our opsin. And of course, we can see better. It does go to the eye like that. And it go to the retina of the eye. It's super highly specific. Is because we have a retinol bound protein that deliver and ensure chaperone to the eye. Alpha tocopherol has that chaperone. None of the other tocopherol and tocotrienol have. So if you take tocopherol with tocotrienol mix, everything stops and the tocopherol go. So if you take tocotrienol with alpha tocopherol, it'll block the tocotrienol absorption. So now, fast forward to today. Now with tocotrienol with all this function and alpha tocopherol cannot share, I last want to take alpha tocopherol with tocotrienol if I want to see the benefit of tocotrienol. We have repeated this in many animal studies, have shown now for cholesterol reduction, have shown now for cancer reduction. The cancer reduction was very dramatic. When we have tocopherol, the tocotrienol simply cannot kill the cancer cell. So we stay clear from that. If you go online to look at all the cancer trial, they use tocotrienol, read carefully. They say that an exclusion criteria would be people that take alpha tocopherol. They don't even explain. If you take alpha tocopherol, they're excluded from the study. They don't want them to be confounding factor to the positive study of the tocotrienol.
That's fascinating. Now, on the topic of the tocotrienols, so the one that I've been recommending for years to people is made by a company called AC Grace. It's called Unique E tocotrienols, and they are using 90% delta and 10% gamma. And when I was looking at your, from my understanding, you're responsible, or at least played a role in this Delta Gold, which is also a tocotrienol, and seems to use a similar composition of 90% delta and 10% gamma. And I'm curious if you could, why that is the case, why you don't include alpha or beta tocotrienol in this formula.
Okay, first I answer your first part first. We are primary manufactured, thanks to goodness that I discovered this plant 25 years ago in Massachusetts. We do not make it in another country. We made it right here in one of the most tax expensive country in the United States. We make it, and I think to the benefit of the audience, we have FDA come to accredit our place. Very grateful for that. We do not use chemical. We do not use solvent. it's the best thing that I can possibly do. So we do this. So we are bulk ingredient supplier. And you mentioned AC grades, and they use our material. So if you buy AC grades, it's our material. You go on a website, there are many other companies. A company I greatly respect would be Designs for Health. They are clearly top notch in this, and they move a lot of this compound, and they got it from us here. So your second question is, why don't we add alpha and beta tocotrienol, and then they will still be tocopherol free? The reason before we got into this annatto, people have used alpha tocotrienol, beta tocotrienol, gamma tocotrienol, delta tocotrienol. So they're fully differentiated. They did it, they use each of them, and all the studies that they have done, and I'm not kidding you, this is before I even discovered the annatto. And the rank order is this: activity, delta tocotrienol is usually 50% or better than gamma tocotrienol, which is almost 10 times more potent than alpha tocotrienol, and in turn, beta tocotrienol is not active. That is what other people have found. This before I even, so there's no hanky-panky there. This is before I even make my discovery. So when I discovered this annatto tocotrienol, and it's 90% delta and 10% gamma, my goodness, this is a nutritional, this is from the plant. So if it is going to do something, this is going to be the best. In fact, when I found it, I immediately called the father of tocotrienol. He's in his 80s now. I call him. He said, Asaf, I found this thing. And you know what he told me? He said, Barrie, he gave his life even longer than I did. If tocotrienol were to go after cancer and would go after lipidemia, annatto tocotrienol as is better do. And if it is not, then we are, of all people, most pity, because we gave our time to this. That was when I told him, I'm all in, man. You designed for me a clinical trial to do this, and let's see where the dice fall. And then he did. That was in the mid-1990s. And ever since then, we now have about 10 to 15 clinical trials. This is truly blessings from above. We systematically study this, and every time when we have compared with any other mixture, we did not do any better, with one exception. And I will be honest with you, this is from University of Southern Florida. The professor have a National Cancer Institute grant, NCI, the world famous NIH NCI. He got my annatto tocotrienol. He asked that if I can purify the delta tocotrienol, remove the gamma tocotrienol. I was very resistant to remove because it's good anyway. To give him the delta, he said, I'll give it to you because we're doing R&D. Fine. He did. And then when he did, the delta was again 100% better, more efficient than gamma. So now he got that 100% is no big deal. I want to stay the same. So then he got $5 million NCI grant to do the research. And now of course, he did it on human being, and it killed the cancer cell of the pancreas, the deadliest of all cancer. He got a renew grant. So if he got a renew grant, he said, Dr. Tan, I cannot use your annatto tocotrienol. They'll renege the grant. He said, whoa, I don't want your grant to be reneged. He said, I will give you the delta tocotrienol. It's just too bad, So I asked him, can you finagle the bagel, have another arm of the annatto tocotrienol? He's not sure just yet. So I'm going to get, but by the way, if the audience hear this, even if he got the delta tocotrienol, which we make for him from annatto, it simply just means that if the 10% of the gamma tocotrienol is removed, so 90% is still the real McCoy. so it's almost a drug, So, but we also try to be careful. If we purify and just have delta tocotrienol, it may sound like a good news, right? But it isn't. What if the FDA knock on my door and said, Dr. Tan, we understand that delta tocotrienol is a powerful drug. You should sell this as a drug. Why sound good? If you flip it, then it's a, hey, We don't want 90% of what you have is a drug. See, if that come across to me as a threat, then I may be closed. So I'm doing just fine to keep this. But if other people publish what they do, it's fine. I cannot block other people. So truth be told, we are supporting University of Southern Florida to do what their research told. That if that works, I don't know where that's going to go. They're going to go somewhere with that. I'm fine. While we're at this, time may not allow you, but I'll say this. Thanks to the Kingdom of Denmark. And I think that in life, not everything comes from me. They saw the value of annatto tocotrienol. And I just spoke with the professor this morning. They have 8 clinical trials, 8 funded by the Danish government. Would you imagine that? Denmark is a much smaller country, super wealthy, of course. They are a rich socialist state like that. They're conducting 8 clinical trials. The cancers are ovarian, breast, lung, and colon cancer. 8 trials. If that trials yield results, that would be very exciting news for us. So far, ovarian cancer proved very positive. They're very high dose. Why so high dose? Because they're stage 4 cancer patients which have no existing option. So he said, let's use the highest dose that have no side effects. So at 900 milligrams per day, no side effects. And they saw the reduction of the increase of survival of the people that have no more option. So we'll see in the next year what a result would yield. I probably will never get FDA approval for the audience benefit, get FDA approval for anything such as this, like a medicine. Just a slim possibility, if the result continue to prove positive and they publish the work, just maybe under the Compassionate Care Act of Congress, when there are no options available, if under a Compassionate Care Act, people may be allowed to do this, but that still require the FDA to rubber stamp this. So if I can do that, I will be happy as a decent human being to provide something when there are no options available. But most of our applications are not so severe, Ryan. So I want the audience to know this. You can Google, if the study is published, you will know exactly what happened. Give me 1 year, the results should be out.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible on the anti-cancer effects of the tocotrienol, because when I mentioned at the very beginning of this interview, one of my mentors, David Getoff, really taught me about vitamin E and lots of other things. And he taught me the importance of high-dose tocotrienols as a foundational element to an anti-cancer regimen. For anyone he's working with cancer, he has them on 750 milligrams of tocotrienol daily, as a really powerful, just one of many things he's doing, you know, with immune support and detoxification and a lot of other things, but it's a really foundational element. And so it's something I've incorporated with people I work with, and just find it to be really useful. And the FDA, I hope they don't come knocking on your door, Dr. Barrie. They tend to do what's not in the best interest of our public many times, because making this a drug would make things a lot more difficult for you and everyone else to get access to this truly this medicine, that I think is better as just a supplement, because that makes it a lot easier to provide and to get access to people. And so as we wrap up, I want to talk about GG. This is a nutrient that I want you to explain what it is. From my understanding, it's also from the annatto plant. And then I want to explain a little bit about, you know, how people can get access to this really rare nutrient and some of the benefits it has.
I know the audience, this is not video. This is a structure of GG. If you look, it's got black and white. Those are carbon and hydrogen, and oxygen group here. And the oxygen group here is not on a phenolic ring, so it's not an antioxidant. Now, GG is something the plant and the animal make, including human being. This is almost prophetic. It's the last common step between an animal and a plant. Those are very different genuses of animal and plant. In the plant use GG. Listen good on this. This is actually what the biochemistry is. The plant use GG to make just about all the polyphenolics that you know. Then you say, name some. I'll name one that are common. All the carotenoids, carotene. You just mumble any carotenoid, lutein, zeaxanthin, beta-carotene, astaxanthin. They have 2 GG, one on here and one on the other side. Then you'll be 40 carbon. That's the beginning, starting point of carotenoid. And all the vitamin E, like that. I'll leave that for now because people are interested in the animal. In the animal, GG primarily is used for making skeletal muscle protein. Ladies and gentlemen, that is 40% of the weight of a human being is skeletal muscle. If we don't think about drugs, as we go older, what is the common thing we notice? We begin to have sarcopenia and loss of muscle mass, a big deal. And think of your elderly parent. And then if you take statin drug, you have myopathy. Why? When you take statin drug to lower cholesterol, that same pathway to lower cholesterol, lower GG, and when you lower GG, that's why you have myopathy. But to our audience, the audience think that, wait a minute, Dr. Tan, he said, when people take statin drug, they know that CoQ10 drop. Voila, that is true. You know why? Because in the human body, CoQ10 requires GG for the synthesis of ubiquinone. That's it. So therefore, in the animal, you need this molecule for making CoQ10 and skeletal muscle too. And then let me tell you the third one. I'm doing this purposely to joke your attention because your audience is probably very understanding of nutritional supplement. Everybody in our industry now is beginning to hear about manoquinone like that. And it's fermentation in the gut. And usually it's MK4, manoquinone 7.
Yeah.
I want to direct the audience attention. Another one. If you got this, you will be blessed and I will be blessed. The most important manoquinone in the human body is not MK7. It's MK4. Why? MK4 is the only manoquinone synthesized inside your body. MK7, 8, 9, and all the other longer one is in the fermentation in the gut. But MK4 is not fermented and is synthesized in the human body. And I hope the Japanese professors that labor on this for so long, they will be nominated for the Nobel Prize. Let me tell you this, I'll take 1 minute and I explain to you. This is so stunning for me.
And quick tip for people listening in, what Dr. Barrie is referring to is vitamin K. So when you buy vitamin K, it comes in different forms, MK4, MK7, and there's MK7 is probably the most common one you'll see in supplements. And what you're saying is MK4 is the form of vitamin K that you want. And that's K2, correct?
Yes, that is K2. Now, when you and I take a lot of green leafy vegetable, people said that you have vitamin K1, that is phyloquinone. The tail is saturated. It almost is analogous to tocotrienol. The tail is saturated, but surprisingly, when you get to the gut, we have homeostasis. A certain amount of vitamin K1 go in. You know, people not thought to this more. If all the vitamin K1 you take goes in, you know what happened, which vegan people do, then you know vitamin K1 is for clotting. If that all of them goes in, then all vegan will clot to death. That never happened. So just think about it. We consume a lot of vegetable, but a fixed amount of vitamin K1 going good. Where do the other vitamin K go? The tail is cut off and the ring goes in. Evolution, the ring goes in. And when it goes, the tail that has been cut off for K1 is saturated. The tail go in. Listen to this. This is just, for me, is a pure blessing. It look for a GG molecule. Remember, GG is making the human body. Remember, it synthesized CoQ10 skeletal muscle. They have shown this in 25 to 30 different organs. You look for GG and stitch that onto the ring of the vitamin K1. And when you do that, that is MK4. So therefore, MK4 is found all over the body. We do not know all the reason why we need MK4, but to date, you can Google, to date, we know that MK4 help in the phosphorylation for energy, MK4 helps in autism spectrum, and MK4 help in making strong bone and anti-arteriosclerosis like that. And in Japan, MK4 is a drug, not MK7. But popularly in the US, we know about MK7 doing all this. So for the audience, I just would appeal to you, as we age, we don't make enough GG. That is the reason why we don't make enough CoQ10, by the way, because when we age, we don't make enough GG, and therefore CoQ10 drug, and therefore we have sarcopenia and this. And if you take statin drug, you make it even worse.
Way worse.
Way worse. So when we have less MK4, you and I don't know enough yet, but in time, people will find out more what MK4 does. All that will harken back to the real issue is not enough GG, for which your body and my body just make less with time. So if we, and this is the time, a small American company, made in Massachusetts, the first in the world, extracted from a plant. So as we age, we are now conducting a study. Listen this carefully. In Texas, we're conducting a study under the cardiologist care, people who are taking statin with confirmed myopathy. One group will continue, the other one, they have GG, they're on a treadmill to see if the muscle pain is reduced. If it is, they will reduce myopathy. That's a study we're now doing. And then we'll do other animal study to prove more points on the MK4 first before we do a clinical trial. So I know that we need another time to do another interview, but so give me another year. I will then embrace this. But until then, I told the audience, and I have to be honest with you, because my doctor said that, it said, Dr. Tan, your cholesterol is over the top. He said that I worry about your arteriosclerosis, so I'm taking statin drug. And then I take a small amount, 150 milligram of GG, and then today, thank goodness, I do not have any muscle problem in my trunk node. So I'm happy with that. My liver enzyme is in control. So I'm continuing that until I learn more on other things. So thank you so much.
Yeah. So anyone listening to this who takes statin, share this with your physician, because there's so many people, Dr. Barrie, who come to me for help, who are on a statin, and they're like, Ryan, my doctor said a low dose statin has no problems, no side effects, no issues. And I'm like, really? Because there's a lot of research demonstrating otherwise, and you need to be replenishing with GG, CoQ10, and really watching what your body's missing and what that statin drug is depleting. And I'm surprised to even hear you take a statin, because it seems like with tocotrienols, the GG, healthy lifestyle, healthy diet, despite the predisposition to high cholesterol, it seems like you would be at very low risk, even if you have high LDL, because you're preventing that LDL from becoming oxidized. So it seems like you wouldn't even need the statin.
Thank you for that. I plan to talk to my cardiologist in the next meeting to either titrate my dose down or eliminate it. So I plan to talk with him on that. So it's coming. Yeah.
All right. I like it. Well, this has been great, Dr. Barrie. There's lots we could dive into. I want to close with a couple things on GG. First, can you tell people listening in the full name of this compound?
Oh, yes. GG is short for geranylgeraniol. I can spell it out to you. GERANYL, like an adjective, and then GERANIOL. So if you Google geranylgeraniol, you will probably find other people studying on it. Most of the study on GG have been on something related to skeletal muscle protein, most of it like that. And then if you look at some Japanese scientists, that's when you see the MK4. And if you look at some even older literature, you will see that GG is required for CoQ10 synthesis.
I wonder, do you know anything about if GG would be helpful for conditions like muscular dystrophy or rhabdomyolysis, where people have extreme breakdown of their muscle tissue?
I have not read any studies like that, but I would say GG and rhabdomyolysis, that would be an obvious one, that they have muscular problems, some like muscular dystrophy, but I don't think I've seen specific study like that, but I've seen related to that. When we have a not used muscle for a long time, we have atrophy of the muscle, and then that marker is called atrogen. So when you add GG, the estrogen would drop. When the estrogen goes up, then the atrophy increase. But when they add GG, the estrogen drop, and then the atrophy decrease. They have shown that. They have also shown in animal study, when they give them GG, it increased the muscle power and muscle force. So
interesting.
we're looking forward to doing that study in time. I know there's so many things to talk about, but I'm not quite there yet.
That's something that would motivate a lot of my listeners, because what you're saying is that GG prevents or rather slows down muscle atrophy. So if you are unable to train, whether it's because you're on vacation or because you had an injury, you can't hit the gym, taking GG will help prevent or slow your muscle breakdown. And then what you're saying too is it's a performance benefit. So it actually help you grow muscle more effectively to get stronger and have better performance with your training, which is of great interest to a lot of people, especially something like GG that has so many other positive attributions to your overall health and longevity. So this is something I'm going to be incorporating into my supplement regimen for sure. And you make, you produce a GG coupled with CoQ10 product, right? Is this something that you sell, Dr. Barrie? Is this something that you could recommend?
If you go online and look at the word duoquinol, like DUOQUINOL, it's a combination of GG and the active form of CoQ10 called ubiquinol. We make that. If you want to download technical papers that we have written, you go to AmericanRiverNutrition.com, or you simply just type my name, Barrie Tan. It probably will lead you there. And then you can download the GG scientific paper, technical paper. I wrote one there. And then the tocotrienol, and then the duoquinol. I clearly differentiate what these three components. We don't do anything else. This is it. This is all we do, and then we study them systematically, and then when there are clinical trials that are produced, we let people know about the clinical trial. I know you're going to sign up very soon, but let me add that component, because I did not know until you told me now. A lot of your people follow you. Exercise is important to them. The Japanese scientists discovered when they gave animal GG, the endogenous testosterone increase. So therefore, we are now conducting a clinical trial in Florida, giving people GG to see if the endogenous testosterone would increase, a lot better than giving people directly testosterone, and then like that. And among other things, because of my age, I shy away from this like that. They're going to measure to see if the libido increase, the exercise performance increase. When would we expect the result? The second half of this year, we would know. So that study is ongoing. And for the audience, why am I doing this? I'm doing this to know if GG does this, can you show? That's why we are doing the research to show that if it does, if and when it become available, we will certainly disclose the data. So be in contact with me about half a year from now. We'll let you know where we are on these kind of trials.
I'll definitely have you back on the show, Dr. Barrie. And that's fascinating. GG potentially increasing testosterone and muscle performance, decreasing muscle loss. That's of a lot of interest to a lot of people. So you're awesome, dude. I really appreciate you coming on the show. This has been great. And I'll definitely stay in touch. For people that are listening in that want to learn more about Dr. Barrie's work, you can go to barrietan.com. You can find him on social media. His Instagram and Facebook is Dr. Barrie Tan, all spelled out, DOCTOR, Barrie Tan. And dude, really appreciate your time today, man.
Thank you so much. Have a great week.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you found it helpful, please share it along to anyone else you believe it can serve. You can submit your own question to be answered on the show by going to ryankennedyhealth.com/podcast. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review for the show. Your feedback helps to support me on my mission to positively impact as many people as possible with this information. Please note, the information depicted in this episode is purely for informational purposes only. Please consult your healthcare professional before making any changes to your lifestyle or routine.